Welcome everybody to our industry innovation webinar, which today will look at the very hot topic of the moment related to generative AI and ChatGPT. My name is Paula Kennedy Garcia. I head up our innovation practice at IntouchCX, and I am delighted to be joined with Jeff Fettes, founder and CEO of Laivly. Laivly is the brainchild of an incredible generative AI solution that we have been evolving in real-world deployment with our clients over the last 3 years. And AI and generative AI, as we know, not necessarily a wholly new topic, but with the emergence of ChatGPT in just November, it certainly is the fastest growing next innovation that we're all experiencing in technology today. And as we tend to see with all things new, it is also dividing opinion with somewhat of a polarized view on what it could and should be used to do. Today, however, we are going to bring to life the benefits that we are seeing of generative AI that it's having on customer experience and the very parts of the customer and agent journey where it can be applied to create really enhanced experiences. We would love your inputs as we do this, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat and we'll field these before we wrap up on today's call. And we're also recording this session so we can get a copy for playback for everyone as well. Jeff, let's get started. You hear me talk a lot about the current innovation supernova is my term that I like to talk at the minute that we are all in the midst of right now, and generative AI is certainly a major part of that, with analyst predictions suggesting 10% of agent interactions will be performed by conversational AI in the next 3 to 4 years. Now, on today's webinar, we have set out to give the 5 lessons of Gen AI in the real world, and I'm going to task you with that very shortly. But let's maybe start by rolling back from that analyst prediction and maybe start with a little color on what is generative AI and how does it work?
Okay, that's a easy topic just to get started with, you know. We'll just cover that off in the first couple of minutes here. Yeah, you know, generative AI is, I get that question a lot, and particularly from business colleagues, because, you know, it seems so advanced and so crazy that it's hard to even imagine how it works. And it's been interesting interacting with professionals, even lifelong, you know, technologists that had to sort of take a minute to get their head wrapped around how it was doing the things that it was doing. Essentially, you know, the technology itself isn't super new. I think, you know, the machine learning is something that's been emerging for quite some time. But what has really changed is the development of a massive library of data that has, you know, was developed. When we're talking about ChatGPT, we're really talking about OpenAI, but there are, you know, multiple organizations that are working on these huge libraries. Laivly actually has a library of our own. I'm afraid it doesn't compare to the size of OpenAI's, but you know, I think everybody's been sort of chasing after this for a while, and the size of that library has really allowed for you know, true simulation of intelligence in a way that suddenly connects to us as people, because you know, it's functioning very much like a human would. We call it generative AI because it's responsible for creating new content. Actually, I have a really good analogy that I can share with you. I saw your question and I came prepared. For those of you that are on here that are really familiar with the technology, apologies for maybe for the oversimplification, but you know, machine learning in general, Paula, what it does is it creates predictions. Okay, so that's what we've been doing with it for years. So you know, you have these massive sets of data, and there's so much data with so much detail that you can predict an outcome based on that data. You know, a good sort of fictional example that I like to use, because actually it was one of the first things that we used way back years ago in the lab when we started testing our ML. We started making predictions on real estate. in Winnipeg, because we had access to all this data that we could just use, right, to see if it was working. So, imagine I just threw up a spreadsheet, and imagine a database that was much larger than this, right? And databases are just like spreadsheets. They you've all heard of like CSV files. That opens up into a spreadsheet-like format. So here you have, what will represent sort of a database of homes, and each of the columns is a feature in the home. And just imagine, I've obviously limited the size of this for this meeting, but imagine that there was like just pages and pages and pages, thousands, millions of features in every single home. Okay. And so if you go to the end of the row, at the end of the row, it's got the list price and the sale price. So if you add one more record and you fill in all of those features, okay, and you basically can then say, based on all those features and comparing it to all the data you have, machine learning, can you predict the sale price of this home? And machine learning can do that. So that's how machine learning works and makes predictions. Now, and that's pretty simple. It's straightforward, right? It's kind of a more advanced, detailed version of how humans would do it. Generative AI kind of takes that one step further and goes in reverse. So, if you imagine instead that you had even more data, pages and pages, like imagine this list went on for miles, like, and you couldn't even see the end of it. Instead, you give it a price. You say, the price is 500,000. Create me a house which features would actually match that $500,000. And so your Gen AI, which actually has two layers. It works with something called a GAN network, and I won't nerd out too much for you, but it's got two sides. The first side generates a whole bunch of content. So imagine rows and rows of content in this database that would essentially result in that $500,000 result. Okay. Then another layer that it sort of challenges those results and pulls out the ones that are a little too crazy, right? Like imagine, a plot of land that was 10 feet by 10 feet and had a house on it that was 400 feet high. That could be worth $500,000 in this neighborhood, but obviously it's not a real place, right? And then essentially you reanalyze it just like you would for prediction and pull the best one out of there that looks the most realistic. And now you've essentially generated a fictitious house. So I don't know if that helps. Does that make sense, Paula? That's kind of real world and simply how generative AI works. We've all seen, for those of you that use Gmail and tools like that, you've all seen how it for years has been able to predict your next couple of words. Generative AI models like ChatGPT are just an extension of that. They are literally running through, like I said, predicting the next word over and over and over again, creating a bunch of content like that, then comparing all of those contents created to the original question to see which one matches up the best.
No, that context's good, but I'm going to stick with that a little minute because I think it leads nicely into our 5 takeaways or 5 lessons, because the very existence of ChatGPT, as an example, is the outcome of many former years of training data from the internet, right? It hasn't just been created on its own. And
Right.
We know that is not foolproof. It has inaccuracy. It has disinformation. It has bias, right? So there's caution. So I do want to acknowledge the fact that skepticism can be understandable too. And again, this is another reason you referenced earlier about us having our own library and having this human in the loop solution from day one. You reference it a lot as, how you would train your agents, but let's talk first of all about why ChatGPT alone is not enough and what we really do need to consider.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let me go back to my my deck here. Here's why it's not enough. Has anyone? I don't know if anyone has played with any of the countless apps and systems that have popped out of ChatGPT. They're sort of derivatives, and they're using the same library and access to GPT. And other models as well. This is obviously one with illustration. The center image actually there, the Santa, was from the holidays. We were trying just for fun to see if we could tease out of the system Santa holding Sid. Sid is our mascot at Laivly. And this is the closest we got, and was still too creepy to use, actually. For the reasons that we were talking about when we were describing how it works, there are limits, right, to what it can do, and there really isn't sort of true comprehension of what it's outputting. It's a bit of a simulation. Here's a couple of interesting examples too that have sort of popped out, in our experimentation. I like the slide says ChatGPT can be confidently wrong. Well, I like to say it confidently lies. It's a little bit like a kid in that way. My friend's kid, I was in a conversation with her. So cute. And she was telling me, we were having a conversation about, this is, she's a 4-year-old, and she decided to explain to me where babies come from. And she confidently told me this whole story about how clams open up on the bottom of the ocean, and there's a baby inside that floats up to the top in a bubble. And when the bubble bursts, it was an amazing little story, and she told it like it was absolutely fact. GPT is a little bit like that, right? It actually works best on its own for problems that don't have specific answers, problems where there's no right or wrong answer. They call them large language models for a reason. It's all about the language, right? So when we're using ChatGPT or a model like this, we really have to be conscientious of, the do's and the don'ts, and the things that are going to add value and not add value. I brought this, Paula, because I thought this would be kind of interesting. This is sort of a representation of how we've been using it. And as you know, GPT in our world is only one small piece of the puzzle. And there are a number of layers, including, like I said, we use some of our own language layer stuff. But this is a kind of an easy way to walk through and explain, how you would treat data and incoming messaging so that, you can use it in a customer care environment. So imagine on the left, this is something coming into, a question. It could be an email, it could be a segment of a chat, right, in the customer care world. And analysis and comprehension is basically where we pull it apart, right, in our world, and separate it into intents. So this is, again, hasn't reached GPT yet. We're doing this on our own. And essentially trying to assess what the questions actually are. And I want to come back to that later, because actually one of the things that's most underestimated about GPT and these language models is, the power of understanding the question. But we pull it apart, we look at the question. The next thing that we do is, we make a prediction of the answer. Again, we do this before we go to GPT, not after. And the reason for that is because, again, we know that GPT is a wonderful liar. So if you ask questions about GPT, about your favorite brands, you will get some funny answers sometimes, right? Sometimes you might get something accurate. But I guess they say about 50% of the time it's inaccurate. And certainly that's not acceptable, in CX, right? Yeah, so we need to have on-brand accurate responses. So this step basically grabs the factual information from our sources of truth, right? In the way our clients might have knowledge bases, they might have training materials, they might, sometimes we even use their website as a source of truth. Sometimes we use all of it. Sometimes we use PDFs, but they're approved, right? And so we make sure that our model, those are the facts that it knows, right? And it's not going out to the internet to grab those facts. Once we pull that all together, the nice thing about generative AI is you no longer have to figure out how to stitch that together, right? In previous in the previous world, you needed the agent to kind of assimilate that for you, or to make it into an intelligible piece, all these different snippets of information. But now you can feed it all into the response generation. This is where something like ChatGPT comes in, and essentially ask it to to take all of that factual information and create a response that that you can use, right? that response comes from, extremely well-developed prompts. The back end of GPT-4 or 3.5 or any of these has their own way of delivering stuff, but it's not that different than the prompts that you give, ChatGPT on your cell phone, right? You're literally, sort of instructing it on how you want it to produce an output. It's become such an important job of engineering, generating those prompts, that some companies actually have started the prompt engineering position. I don't know if you've been seeing that around, but it's something that our COO was talking to me about yesterday. It's just amazing to me, right? It's literally an engineering position now, developing prompts for language models. The next step, in our world is once you have sort of a flat, emotionless response, you put it through another layer that adds the brand voice. This is actually really kind of fun. One of the things that we can do to support CX is really get to understand the way that brands like to talk about themselves. The word choice, right? If we're doing things for some brands, they like extremely buttoned up professional responses, a lot of 3-syllable words, those crisp consonants. And some of our brands like really casual, I won't name the brand, but one of our brands literally asked us if we could train Sid to speak like a surfer dude. So we did that. And Sid speaks to their customers. And now the customers don't know that, but it's, it comes across with a certain kind of tone and brand voice. We also want to include, emotional intention here as well. Was the original question angry? Was it happy? Was it excited? We want to respond appropriate like a human would. And then we get to the last step, which we kind of take one more look. We filter it. We make sure that everything that is in there is verified and correct, like phone numbers, email addresses. And then there's the one thing that you touched on that I kind of I didn't forget, but I wanted to leave it for the end because it is the most important, and that's security and PII. So, I've been doing a lot of speaking on this topic. We've obviously been doing this for years, Paula, right? So we lived it and breathed it, but for a lot of companies, it's very new. And, I was at a show a couple of weeks ago, and somebody really excitedly put up their hand and said, we just opened up a ChatGPT window, and we just have our agents putting the emails that we get into GPT and asking for a response. It's great. It's awesome. It's been so good in the call center. Like, well, what kind of company is it? It was a bank.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I had to explain to them that when you do that, you are sending PII not only up into the cloud, but you are actually sending it voluntarily into a language model. And it can create all sorts of problems. The example we were using is, for the bank is if you're having a conversation with someone who has defaulted on their mortgage or filed for bankruptcy, you've now, that's not a public figure. You've now put that information into ChatGPT, and that's the only thing that GPT knows about that person, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's very important that we look at security. In our model, what we do is before we even start, we remove all of the PII, because actually the language model doesn't need any of that. And we replace it with just fictitious stuff that wouldn't give anybody a clue. All the PII stays in-house. It stays inside of our 4 walls. That's the way we handle it. I think a lot of companies probably do the same. And then you'll see at the end in the filter, input, enrich step, we replace the PII at that moment. So it's never really left either the computer desktop of the agent, or it's never left our environment. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And I think there's a couple of things from this is one, it's, you say, the new tool comes out, everybody gets very excited. I love that example for all the wrong reasons of the bank, because we don't want that to happen, but it is possible. I read another consumer electronics major global brand has been caught out in exactly the same way through coding, where their engineers have put coding into GPT, and all of a sudden their IP is out there, and they didn't want that to happen, right? So it is intricate, and seeing these multiple layers, I think it helps everyone understand how you don't just copy paste into a tool and expect to get the right answer. You certainly don't copy paste into a tool and send it directly to a customer and expect that to be automatically brilliant for that customer. What I'm seeing here is all of these different layers is really where the sophistication comes in, and that's the last 3 years of hard work, right? The sophistication notion of learning as we go and just pooling different types of information which we will have access to, but in a very controlled and secure way in order to get that perfect outcome at the very end.
For sure. And, I think the one thing I, would say is, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be super excited about this technology, right? It's just how we think about it, right? It's like somebody gave me this example. It's like somebody has created, a cog, or a ball bearing, the first ball bearing. And it's up to us what we want to do with that, right? What can we build? Can we create? What wonderful solutions can we make? But you do have to be thinking about all of that stuff, right? When you're doing this, and I think if you do, and you have that stuff checked off, the possibilities, right, are really stunning. And I think we're going to see, as you said, sort of a revolution in our industry because of this coming technology.
Oh, 100%. I think it's hard not to be passionate about this and what the potential can be with it. It brings me on nicely into our second lesson, where we talk about actions speak louder than words, because, we're now talking about generative AI and what it can do for this efficiency and, to a degree, automation. But many on the call will have lived through RPA, which has often had shortfalls. They'll have lived through static bots, which don't necessarily contribute to the reduced volume that we expect. And customers want reassurance and trust that their answers are right. Brands and our clients want reassurance and trust that we'll help them with their ROI, right? So just talking about that, action speaking louder than words, what makes us different? And why is it something that we should pay attention to?
Yeah, it's great. This is one that I think is really important. I've been doing this for a long time. I know you have too. Probably everybody on this call. I recognize a lot of the names on here. I mean, we're lifers. Let's face it, right? I say this with great sensitivity in my heart to anybody that's using this tech. Generally speaking, traditional chatbots have failed, right? And when I talk about what happened there, or what I mean by that. It's not that they're not in use. There's definitely some that are in use and so forth. It goes back to, probably even 2015, 2014. The media was talking a lot about AI back then. And so our clients were coming and saying, we need a chatbot. We want a chatbot. And so I was going around looking for a great solution, and for some of our partners at the time that were really pushing for something, I partnered them up with companies that were focusing on it. And they were able to surface, good information. I think what I learned at the time was language wasn't necessarily the biggest barrier. So I think a lot of people think that because ChatGPT has come, this has solved all the problems that we had before. But what I found the biggest problem was that chatbots generally would surface information that was already available in other self-service channels. So imagine, you're a brand, you've heard about chatbots, you implement a chatbot, it costs money, right? It definitely costs the brand some money to put it out there. And your goal is, let's say, to deflect, right? You want to deflect a certain volume of your contacts. I hate the word deflect, but everyone understands what I mean. So, I'm recommending this. And what would happen is people would go to the chatbot and they'd say, oh, company X, what time is my local store closing tonight? And the chatbot would surface the answer. Great. There's an answer, except the problem is that answer, they used to find it on Google, on the website, and that was free. Now they paid 75 cents for it. So what was happening was it was increasing engagement, which, I think that is actually a good goal if that's your goal. But if your goal is to reduce cost, a lot of brands were finding was now they were increasing engagement in ways that weren't really adding value to the brand. And, the other example I use is, you'd say to a chatbot, what is your exchange policy on such and such? And the chatbot could say, this is our exchange policy. And then you would say, okay, well, I want to exchange this item then. And then what would the chatbot do? It would say, okay, well, then let me just transfer you to an agent, right? And so again, the problem is the front end of that contact costs money, but it doesn't necessarily add value. So where I'm going with this is that, GPT doesn't solve that problem. It more elegantly will be able to draft answers for you, and it's certainly a lot better at understanding the questions, right? The other thing that drove me crazy about traditional chatbots, and again, apologies to anyone on here who's using it in this way, but I'm speaking as a customer or as a user, not necessarily as a CX expert here. You go to a website and you see a chatbot and you think, or you see a chat, you think I'm going to chat with someone, and you start typing, and what do you get? You get a menu. Right? It's effectively an IVR on the web, right? And the reason they're doing that is because the chatbots had a hard time understanding the questions too. So they needed to narrow the scope and say, well, you can really only ask these 5 questions or these 7 questions. GPT is going to help to solve that problem, but it isn't going to solve the problem of what happens next. So, this is kind of like at least in our world, how our traditional agent assist, system would work, right? So you have the customer, they contact the agent. In our world, you have Sid, which is that's our little blue mascot, and the Sid interface sitting on the side that would handle automations and surface information. This might be something that happened after post chatbot. We created outside of our desktop version of Sid, a virtual desktop. So imagine, Paula, there's in the cloud, there's like a little fake in the eye of your imagination blue ball that's floating. Yep. and has there he is and has the same workstation in front of it as one of your agents would, and has learned through the process, through the automation process, by watching the agent working, has learned all of the workflows. Okay, so so now the agent can say to the assistant, right, or could say to the assistant, can you help me process this exchange for Paula, right? Because Paula's asking, right? So we went from chatbot got to the agent. Now we're speeding up the agent and making the agent more efficient and better at processing exchanges. But now with ChatGPT, we've realized that we have a bot on our hands that from an AI perspective, right, knows how to process exchanges. So, where the new world is going is customers can use an agent as the bridge to that exchange, but now they'll also be able to use generative AI or ChatGPT as the bridge to that exchange, right? So, with some of our customers, we have them speaking either through a chatbot, right? Through GPT or other forms of generative AI directly to the virtual desktop, which we call digital worker, or we have the agent assisting. So, I guess to wrap this whole thing up is the actions speak louder than words, right? You need to, if you don't do more than just speak, you're not really driving the technology or the utility of it much further than traditional chatbots.
Yeah, but so again, what I love about this is I think one of the undercurrents of artificial intelligence just as a whole, and it has been exacerbated by some of these polarized views, is that automation is just going to remove jobs. It didn't happen with chatbots. It didn't remove the volume, and it still required you to staff in your contact centers. And if we do GPT, we won't need a contact center. There's a lot of big thoughts out there. But right. I know that we very much see this through a much more creative lens, where AI creates the building blocks for things that previously probably we didn't think were possible. And the human and the AI really coexist, and the technology is just changing the nature of the work that has to be done, which creates this really rich environment for knowledge and for everything. The human work doesn't disappear, it just becomes a different type of work. And so really what we're saying is, in the old world of more static automation, you might have looked at the spreadsheet to say, I need all of this stuff to get automated, and 1 equals 1. I have 1 less call, and eventually I need 1 less person, and so on and so forth. But we can think about how we just do things more efficiently and less expensively. We can think about a different ROI model, which in turn of being more efficient for the work that you handle and manage for your customer, those experiences get better, but also the role of the agent is getting more advanced in a way that we can support, not by inundating them with more things they have to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really well said. I try to tell everyone in our industry, this is going to be a fast change, and change is stressful. But on the other hand, it's for the last 20 some years that I've been in this industry, that people have been sort of presiding over the end of the agent. And
Yeah.
do you know how many people it took to annotate the copies of the internet that created the OpenAI model? Hundreds of thousands of agents. And so those are, there's a great example of what you're saying, right? It's,
Yeah.
the work is drifting. I've got friends that worked at IntouchCX and were agents. And when I've checked in with them, they're working at firms now where they essentially are doing the same kind of work, right? They're sitting in front of a computer, but they are annotating data models, right? And it's a kind of data entry. A really good way to, somebody said to me, gave me this analogy, and I really liked it. It's kind of like, we're all farmers, right? And somebody has invented the tractor, and here it is, right? And so, I don't think anyone would want to go back in time and not have the tractor today, right?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't feed the world. So anyway, there's different ways to look at it. But I think it's exciting.
So when we talk to our clients about, really needing to reconsider that customer care ROI for this new environment, again, it brings us on to another lesson. We talk a lot about scaling up. There's that word back again. Scaling up is better than deflecting down. It's back, but that's kind of where we're at with our lessons and what you've learned along the way. Jeff, talk to me about that. Talk to me what this new ROI can mean in the customer care environment.
Sure. Let me run ahead to this slide a little bit. So I just want to be clear, this is not a client of ours, and I'm only a customer of this brand, but I'm interested in what they're doing, and it's Bank of America. And one of the things that they have done that I thought was remarkable, they got into generative AI and these tools around the same time that we were really getting into it. Back in 2018, they've launched a tool that effectively is a generative AI driven financial advisor. And so you think about that, right? As CX professionals, a lot of us immediately go to deflection again. We think of deflection, right? Which again, the reason I hate that word, I should qualify that, is because, I got into this business because I I'm into customer care. And to me, the word deflection sounds a lot like talk to the hand,
Yeah.
Our job is not to deflect customers, right? It's to help them. So I prefer to say, sort of put people into the right queue where they're going to get an appropriate kind of service. And this provides for that. So Bank of America didn't look at this as an opportunity to reduce the amount of staff that they had that were giving financial advice. What they looked at is they looked at their entire portfolio, and they said, wow, you know what? We generally only right now are able to touch our customers that have at least $50,000 or $60,000 in the bank, right? So these are customers that have big savings accounts, and everybody else, we don't have time to talk to them because it's just too expensive. It just costs too much money, right? So their approach was exactly what you said, which is scale. They said it wasn't about deflecting. It was, now that we can do this cheaply and efficiently and effectively, right? We can talk to everybody all the time. And so their tools allowed them to give detailed financial advice. It may not be quite as comprehensive yet as, a 10-year veteran, financial advisor, but, by all accounts, it's very good. And you can tell that it's good because of how often it's been used. The stats are that since 2019, when they launched it, it has been used 1 billion times. And those of you that are on the contact, your brands and how many interactions you get in a year, right? I'll bet that everybody's interactions combined, that are on this call combined would probably, still not be 1 billion, right? In that amount of time. So, it's created this wonderful opportunity for scale, where, and I think, like you said, Paula, we all need to rethink the ROI calculation now for for how customer care works, because, so in other words, are we trying to, make things, cheaper or deflect them, get customers not to call? Or can we now say, wow, it's so cheap when we talk to customers that there's a positive ROI, that every time we connect with them, right, they spend a little bit more than that, or every time we connect with them, it re-ups their loyalty to our brand by this amount of time. And so if you can ROI successfully, what we're seeing is a lot of brands that now are actually investing more into those interactions, right? So where it used to be, with the chatbot example, increasing engagements just increased cost, and that was bad. Now we're saying, wow, if you could increase engagements in an effective way, that ROIs positively, then rather than deflecting, you actually might want to invest to increase that engagement, because the more you spend, the more that you can get in return.
Yeah, Jeff, I'll go further on that, and it's the piece behind the screen, right? One thing is, we've seen through that layering that you did, that this complicated query that I will have with the Bank of America, I'll now get that information fed to me, and it'll be there, it'll be accurate, so there'll be less errors. I'll be able to get that information to the customer faster, so better response time. And the effect of that on me as an agent, if my life is easier, that I do not have to toggle between 10, 20 different screens to get information, to think, is it right? Will I pass my QA? That in itself is helping me want to stay in this job and feel more empowered. And the other area of cost of us all running our business is when people leave and we have to retrain and build that knowledge. So there's more to that ROI, I think, than even just the customer facing interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a really good point. Like, we have, one of the brands that we work with is a big global brand that everyone would recognize. But since I didn't ask their permission, I won't drop their name. They're what they're doing with generative AI and with Laivly, which is so interesting, is a solution to manage their ratings and reviews. So this is everything from Glassdoor to Google reviews, to Amazon reviews on their products and services. And they had noticed that there was an ROI, and a positive ROI, in how they handled the ratings and reviews. But that ROI came from search engine optimization. And so search engine optimization doesn't happen with templated answers, which is typically how, we used to do things in the contact center, right? You'd start, if an email or a response, an agent would start with some kind of a template or snippets of a template, and then you'd construct a response. Doesn't work with ratings and reviews, right? Because you want to try to juice the search engine optimization. So they have, again, to this effect, now with generative AI, they can answer every review. It's supervised by agents. So agents are watching that. It's drafting it. They're making occasional changes to it. But what it's allowed them to do is scale up this program, because every one of those interactions now went from having a negative ROI, where it took 5 minutes and it just didn't make sense, because even though it was having a good impact, they had to really narrow their focus, to now their ambition is, over the next 5 years, they want to be in a position to answer every single review on every one of their products. And again, I didn't say who they are, but I will tell you, they have 1 million SKUs in there. So wow. They're a global brand. So they have a lot of products. They want to answer every review on every product, positive or negative, on every platform, major platform on earth. That's their ambition in the next 5 years. So it sounds crazy. We couldn't have even considered it a few years ago, but today, right, when it's got a positive ROI, why not, right? Yeah. Every answer produces revenue.
You couldn't have built a team size to maintain that sensibly, as right. Effectively what is an admin team, and this technology will allow them to do that. And I guess what you're saying is, as those changes and that customization happens by the agents time after time for the review where they do intercept, it's constantly teaching the engine specifically for that brand, which allows for mass automation at that scale. It's just incredible, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it's amazing.
But it doesn't work for everything. So, let me bring it back to a little bit of reality here as well, because there are really great examples out there. And we've talked also about that dependency on the source data, the truth data, that assumption that one size fits all. But I mentioned earlier about you talk a lot, Jeff, about onboarding your AI just like you would a team member. It is important to have that customization and to choose where things work and don't work. And what have you learned through the period of time that you've been building your solution in generative AI with that on areas that maybe it hasn't been as applicable for versus other areas where it's highly, highly successful?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think that, one of the things that everybody's been searching for years is sort of this solution that you could just sort of turn on and in an instant, right, everything is great. And it doesn't have to take long, but we always say onboard your AI like you would a team member. And so what I mean by that is, first of all, you wouldn't just like hire any person for any job in your company, right? Well, you also don't just sort of throw AI at every problem, right? And certainly not generative AI. You want to have, a good understanding of how things fit in. A lot of times that happens during the hiring process, right? I mean, we hire people, at Laivly or at IntouchCX, and a lot of times, we hire them into a role and we take some time with them, right? Before we, introduce them to clients, before we, let them, be autonomous. When we hire agents on a new contact center program, right? We don't just, first day, in the door, put them in front of our customers, right? So it's the same thing with your AI. You want to pilot your ideas. You want to, iterate and understand what works. And it's important that again, it's not one size fits all. So you want to choose a solution that's commensurate with your brand. IntouchCX, I know, is really big on culture, right? On the culture of brands, and that's something that we focused on there for many, many years. Your AI should be like that, because the biggest barriers that are left to adoption of AI, I believe, are culture, right? The example I use is if you're a major airline and, because I travel a lot, as do you, right? You probably, get the texts now, where I get these texts saying, your flight has been delayed or the gate has changed or whatever, right? And like, those are great. They're super convenient. But if you say to a bride the day before their wedding, we lost your dress, sorry, right? Like, that coming from an AI is not going to go over great. They're going to want to talk to someone, right? So like, if there's an emotional quotient there, that's a cultural thing. And I think we all have to understand our business. Sometimes the best place for AI is to sit behind the agent, to assist the agent. You want to have a human face. Sometimes, like I said, that might just be getting in the way, and the best thing to do is to iterate, on which things belong to the humans and which things belong to the AIs. But you want to have a process that develops that.
Yeah, you hit a sore spot there, Jeff, because actually, my cars for my wedding did cancel on me the night before by text, way before Gen AI was available. So yeah, nice example.
Oh, I mean, it's awful, right? It happens.
It happens.
Yeah, my same thing, my 25th anniversary party. And I got a text like right before saying, sorry, we just didn't get around to doing the flowers stuff. I was like, okay, well,
the party will still go on. Yeah.
The party went on, but yeah.
I think what I love and what I've heard a lot through the things we've talked about is just that realization of the absolute diversification of where generative AI is actually enabling a customer experience. I mean, I keep thinking about it. I feel very much like it's in co-pilot mode, right? It's coaching the agent, it's offering suggestions to them, it's eliminating those tedious tasks, so the repetitive tasks as well. It's automating data entry, processing different things in different ways in an automatic fashion, and it's surfacing knowledge in real-time assist. I mean, that's a really rich tool to have at the fingertips of agents, because and you and I have spoken quite a bit before, I don't think in any training program or any elevated skill set or any enhanced pay that you can give someone, you could actually equip one agent with all of that ability to do things in a way that would please a customer in an acceptable amount of time. And I think the power that this tool has is really, really spectacular for that, when it is designed and done purposefully in that way.
Right. I mean, it can do those things if we build it that way, right? To be
Yeah.
clear, right? Like those are things that ChatGPT cannot do, but ChatGPT is a gateway. It's an on-ramp
To making it happen.
that has enabled, a lot of those things at Lively. When ChatGPT hit the mainstream, well, apart from the fact that it was great because it no longer took me 20 minutes to introduce my job, I did explain to people. Apart from that, we were really excited because having access to this open large language model just accelerated our development, right? The things that we were able to do that were on a roadmap for 2-3 years from now, we could suddenly do today, which was great, so a lot of we were talking earlier about, the partnering with, with automation and other tools that like the stuff you described, that's where that comes from. To me, that's GPT plus.
It's foregoers. It's that evolution of where it gets to. And listen, everyone in this call, we have all had firsthand experience of, I guess, the unexpected challenges that comes into delivering flawless CX. This is one industry where supply and demand can encounter recurring issues in the click of a finger all of the time. And I think this particular tech shift, when it is designed and applied purposefully, it can unlock supply via intelligent conversation. Every customer everywhere can have contact on demand in a way that we couldn't do if it was simply through staffing. But to get to that does take time, and it does take stages, right? And I think with my innovation hat on, the reassurance I guess I would give people thinking about making this change is that you don't have to go from soup to nuts immediately to make that big change. It is about innovating through iteration. It is about learning as you go. It is about teaching your own model. And I guess you've had experience that the fact that we have been doing this for 3 years. We've started at day one, and we've worked with our clients along the way to get to a point where actually we're a little bit ahead of the curve with the industry, the innovation that's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I brought this slide, on this topic because, I wanted everyone to kind of see, what the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow looks like, or the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Instead of looking for sort of that, that immediate quick fix, right? This is a representation of agent-free interactions using, Sid and Lively, our tool. So if you can imagine that, again, I know that a lot of people just heard of generative AI in November, but it's been around for a long time. And even GPT has been around for a long time. If you look at clients that started working with it in 2020, what this represents is 18% of their interactions where we were using generative AI were handled basically without any changes from the agent. So this is in an agent assist environment, okay? Like if GPT or Gen AI wrote an email for the agent. So, it doesn't, at first blush, it doesn't look that good. You think, well, only 18%. But if you think about your live emails or your live calls today, if suddenly 18% of those could be handled with automation. So it was immediately delivering value even back in 2020, right? And for the other, 82%, it was still speeding up their interaction, because now instead of an agent, for example, having to compose an email from scratch or do a massive amount of research, like you said at the beginning of a call, right? It was handling the majority of that stuff. So it was still helping with the other 82%. But if you look at this curve over time, what's so interesting is that we get into this year, and now, we are at about 80%. So, for those programs that have used this for a couple of years, we're at the point now where 80% of their interactions, can be handled. They might still be supervised by an agent, right? But, the agent is effectively making no changes. And so you can imagine that a lot of those clients say, okay, well, which of the dispositions in this 80% do the agents never make changes? It's like basically 99% accurate, right? Let's just have Sid handle those directly. Let's just have generative AI talk to the customer and handle those directly. So, of this 80%, and of this graph, there's a chunk of those that, move into the self-service column. Again, go back to 2020, that chunk seemed really small. Today, it's quite large. And it's really remarkable, I think, where that could go for the brands that are really interested in looking for, being able to, I'm not going to say deflect, but being able to reclassify, their customer service interactions. We've got brands that we work with that there's certain tasks that would be way more popular with their customers if they're in self-service, right? And the brands really do not necessarily want to have the agent there either, right? It's just there's a complexity to it, or there's a physical labor part of it, or there's some reason why they have to throw bodies at these problems. Today, with this technology combined, we have been able to take the most complicated problems and dramatically reduce the interaction for those customers that want it. And that's very cool, because that's something, for someone like me that's been, I'm obviously a lifelong in technology and software engineering. When I got into customer care, I dreamed of like, wow, maybe someday, robots will be able to do this. And now we're here. We're at that moment where like that's possible. And we've been able to deliver for clients, results on their most complicated workflows, moving those into self-service. Sometimes, even though we can, the decision is let's not, again, for the cultural reasons you mentioned earlier. So, you have to sometimes iterate, pilot, and test to learn those things.
Oh, always, and re-strategize as you go along that journey, right? To think about what is the new end goal and what do you want to do. I mean, I think there is noise. There are asks for pauses on what we do with Gen AI. There's lots happening in the industry around this topic, and it goes much greater than the CX space. I think what's wonderful is that we have been able to take this incredible innovation and apply it into our industry in a very meaningful way, when previously most of a mechanism to get cost out was done via just maybe solely labor arbitrage and some technology. And now we can really combine that human and AI component, as I say, kind of coexisting and co-working together. I think, Gen AI isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's here probably to get faster, more intelligent, doing much more things. And I'm here for it. I'm here to see exactly what we can do for it. When we have the wit to put some context around it and structure around it. So it is really exciting about where this is headed. I do want to just take a moment. I'm conscious of where we are in time. I want to take a moment and just gather our thoughts on those 5 lessons that we wanted to take away, because I think, Jeff, Laivly and yourselves and the team are in a very unique position to have had 3 years already behind you, and something where people are just trying to get their heads wrapped around it immediately. So the big one for me, ChatGPT alone is not enough, is certainly don't ruin your customer experience in the race to get the tool out the door, right? There's a lot of...
And don't send banking information into the model.
Yeah, don't paste your credit card into GPT, for sure. Secondly, action speaking louder than words. I think this helps everybody understand that it is the next iteration of something which has previously been static, and now you can take advice information with a call to action on the back of it, and that call to action can be working in parallel to your agent, having an incredibly rich, empathetic conversation with your customer, and really elevating all of that experience together as one. Scaling up is better than deflecting down. I think this is a really great one that debunks a myth that it's all about getting rid of things and reducing jobs and getting rid of tasks. It actually really helps you enhance the processes around the customer and starts to think differently about what that ROI is in the new environment.
Yeah, that one's a big concept, and I would invite anyone to to speak with us more about it if you're interested in hearing about that. Only because I'm a big proponent of it. I love the thought of customer service being seen as a positive, not as a cost center. So I will literally talk to anyone that wants to have this conversation with me.
I agree. I love also that you humanize the technology, onboarding your AI like you would a team member. There is so much to be learned from that. And to treat it as individualistic and to realize that relationship between both of them, I think is really, really powerful. And I mean, it would be remiss of me. I'm the one who drives innovation for CX in this team, for IntouchCX on this call. So absolutely, you've got to innovate through iteration. But I love that you've got you've got that use case, you've got the examples, you're a nice pair of really great sea of hands for anyone who wants to get into this space to come along and see how to do it through time, how to do it in a phased process. And actually, they will get there faster than probably some of our clients did 3 years ago, because we have 3 years experience behind us coming on 4. So I think it's a really good 5 takeaways. I'm going to ask you for a 6th. Those are our 5 lessons. What would be the 6th piece of advice, your takeaway for everyone on the call today as they move forward with Gen AI?
Well, the 6th always has to be, don't forget about your agents. Don't forget about your agents, because, again, I've been doing this my whole life. And, I do believe, I totally agree with you. This is here to stay. It's going to change the industry. It's going to change the world, I think, in positive ways. But there's 2 things that on the agent side of things. One, let's remember that, they're our greatest asset in customer care, and they still will be going forward, play an important role. And let's also remember that the application of this technology that's changing so fast, we want to do this in a positive way that benefits our industry and everyone, right? So, I want to consider the ethics of the application of the technology, how it impacts the people, that are working with it. But, I see it as a big positive. I see that, if you remember, kind of like, that expression, my grandma used to say, don't forget where you came from. And, don't forget our agents, because they are the ones that are going to make this happen for us. They're the front line. They're going to make this work. They're where the data is coming from, right? So that'd be my 6th.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you as always for your time today and for sharing the lessons that we have with Laivly. I'd welcome anyone in the call who'd like to get in touch with us. Please do reach out with any questions that you have. I know not always do we ask those on these sessions, but as you take this away and think it over, there may be some things to come to mind. And Jeff and myself are both available for anything that you may need.
For sure. And next time, I promised Paula, when we were talking earlier, we did a lot of talking this time. Next time, I promise I'll bring all the toys if anyone wants to see them. If you want to see what we've been doing with other clients, feel free to to send an email and we can have a demo. But you don't have to twist our arms very hard to show off this stuff, because we're geeks.
To do a demo. Yeah, I would encourage anyone. It's pretty impressive stuff. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Jeff, and I look forward to speaking to everyone again soon.
Thank you.